Okay, good afternoon. My name is Randa Lopez Morgan. I am the events and programming librarian here at LSU Libraries. I'm also the liaison to the College of Agriculture, but also I have been somehow miraculously gifted or drafted into the super fun world of systematic reviews. Systematic reviews can be very intimidating. They can be very frustrating. I've taken 2 separate workshops on them, and I still feel like every time I take a workshop, I learn something new. So my goal today is to we're not going to dive as deep as a one-on-one consultation might be, because all of you have various different majors and backgrounds and fields. And so what we're going to do is mostly cover what is a systematic review, what isn't a systematic review, go through all of the fun basics of it. Some of you I recognize. I see a lot of ag faces and ag names, which makes me very happy. And then I feel like 1 or 2 of you have maybe actually met with me before to do systematic reviews. So that's very exciting. So let's go ahead and jump in. Just a reminder, I've made it so you guys can't unmute yourselves at the moment. I will open up and the chat's available. You can ask your questions in the chat as we go, or you can save it to the very end. We will have time for questions. I'll answer them the best I can. And let's get started. So the very first thing I'm going to do, let me share my screen here, is I'm going to share this, and then let me get the chat so that I can send you guys. So I'm going to show you how to get to this as well, but I'm also going to put the systematic review guide into the chat. Where is it? Sorry, I'm also having to find it. There it is. Okay. So send to everyone. There you go. Okay, so everyone should have that. Okay, so, all right, let's start. The very first thing to get to the systematic review guide, what you need to do is you are going to go to the LSU Libraries website, and I always recommend just going and logging into your MyLSU first to get you through all of the weird firewalls, that kind of stuff. So get into the library's website, and then you'll go to research guides, to this little toolbox here. Then you can either search at the top systematic reviews, or you can scroll down to systematic reviews guide. And this guide is just a collection of resources that are available for you as researchers. Some of them are fee-based, some of them are free, and I'll try to make sure to mention which is which. But what I've done here is just created a really in-depth research guide, and this has probably changed since some of you have seen it last. I've been working really hard. The last workshop I got to attend was a couple months ago, and it was hosted by Cornell, and it was a wonderful workshop, but a lot of the stuff I've gotten permission to borrow from them, so thank you to Cornell for that. But the first thing, so what is a systematic review? So I often tell students a systematic review is basically where you find as much stuff on your topic as possible. And there's a very standard, very systematic way of doing that. You're going to formulate a research question, and you're looking for very specific things. And you are then going to search as many, or maybe not as many, but some databases to try and find as much of the literature on that topic as possible. Then you can synthesize it, and you can say, okay, this is maybe the best practice, or this is where the gaps in the literature exist, or this, we need to do more research in this area. Maybe this is everything on this topic that's been published in this journal. So a systematic review definition is a methodical and comprehensive literature synthesis, and it's focused on a very well-formulated research question. So again, the aim is to identify and synthesize all of the scholarly research on a particular topic, and not just things that were peer-reviewed, but your gray literature, policy, things that were only book chapters that may be on this thing. You can get really into the nitty-gritty of the gray literature, but it may or may not include a meta-analysis. We're not really going to dive too deeply into a meta-analysis today, but a meta-analysis, just in case you're really just curious, and I found a really good definition for it. So I wasn't going to lie, but basically it's where you take all of the evidence and you do a statistical analysis on it. That's not, and I lost it. It's fine. So you're basically taking all of the evidence and then all of the data in that evidence, and then you are doing a statistical analysis on that. And that's just so you can get maybe a better sample size, or maybe you can see, okay, out of all of these studies, these were the ones that showed best, like the most, oh goodness, the best, gosh, my brain, way of doing something, or maybe the best, like this is the best methods for something, or there's so many things that can go into it. I do apologize about that. But a lot of times people get told you have to do a systematic review, and you don't necessarily have to do a systematic review. There's so many different types of reviews out there that your systematic reviews, they're for a very specific purpose and a very specific reason. This is not to be confused with like a traditional literature review or a narrative review. No student wants to do a review that's not systematic. They want to make sure it's done in the best possible way. But the way that a systematic review is done is what makes it special. It's what makes it a systematic review. So I have published some different research guides that if my guide doesn't have something that you need or something that's helpful, some of these other guides will. And then also what we follow is the PRISMA statement. So this was published in 2009, and you can go, they're basically how to do it, everything you need to know, the explanation and elaboration can be found here, but they actually are in the process of updating the PRISMA statement. So there's a 2020 statement. So it's not been like, it's in the process of being pushed through, and it will probably be by the end of the year. But so we're going to kind of be talking about like the both statements, the older and the newer ones. Also, we have some examples of systematic reviews and meta-analyses, and then just some different, examples for you to look at. Now, how can librarians help you? There are two services that I currently offer as a librarian. It's either I can help you as a consultant, which is primarily what I do, or a co-author. Now, both are helpful. Both, just really depends on what your topic is, but it also depends on my time as well. So as a consultant, I can help provide background information, resources on the whole systematic review process. You can meet with me one-on-one, or I can meet with your team. We can talk about databases, how to register your protocol, platforms, citation management software. I can show you how to create search alerts. I can help you find existing reviews on your topic. I can also help you track down full text articles or talk about your search strategy. This is usually the most popular option for students, also for me, just because systematic reviews do take time. But if I did have the time, and if I was able to, co-authorship is also sometimes an option. And I am not the only librarian. There are other subject specialists that could possibly one day be interested in co-authorship. But what that entails is I would select the databases and the gray literature resources. I would help you, or I would help you. I would also help write the search strategy. I would sit down and spend time figuring out what works, what doesn't work. We'll translate the searches into the different databases, which I'll kind of explain what that means in a little while. I can help you with your protocol. I can perform deduplication and then also train your team on how to dedupe and what that means. I can help you, figure out what screening software to use. I can also write a portion of the methods section. But honestly, it just depends on my individual workload, how long of it, what your timeline looks like. I often tell people that the biggest part of systematic reviews is just managing expectations. And then if you scroll down even further, here are all the tasks and the suggested timelines for how long each of these steps takes. So that's usually the first question as students come in and they say, well, I want to do a systematic review and it needs to be done in May and it's January. Not likely gonna happen. It is possible. It's just your systematic review is probably not going to be as good as you could make it. So you have to assemble a team. You do need a team. Part of the systematic review process is transparency. And the best way of getting transparency and eliminating bias is to have multiple people on your team. So you need a team. You have to figure out project manager. You have to review the different methodologies. You need to define research question, inclusion, exclusion criteria, all of these steps, and they take time. Doing the title and abstract screening alone usually takes 2 to 3 months. And also it all depends ultimately on your topic. If you're picking a very broad topic, you could have thousands of results. If you're picking a very specific topic, you could have 10. So it just depends. But it can take almost a year to fully do a proper systematic review with a team. So this is just to give you an idea. Again, every timeline is a little different, but that's, you know, what some of the things we can do. What type of review is right for you? So I've stolen this from Cornell. They have this wonderful flow chart about all the different types of reviews, and it's also kind of based off this paper, A Topology of Reviews and Analysis of 14 Review Types and Associated Methodologies. So there are 14 different types of reviews, and so when students say, I have to do a systematic review, my next question is, okay, are you sure that's the type of review you want? Or do you need to do a scoping review? Do you want to do, are you by yourself? Because that's a systematized review. Are you on a very short timeline? Then maybe we need to do a rapid review or an umbrella review. So this little flow chart here can help you figure out what kind of review is best for you. And if you click this little next arrow, it kind of goes into the details of each one. There's also this here recently, in the past couple of years, you're seeing reviews not just in the hard sciences, not just in the medical field. It originally started off in the medical field. You're seeing them in the humanities and the social sciences as well. And we're also starting to see an influx of reviews or systematic reviews. And so you want to make sure that you're not just doing a systematic review to do one, but maybe that there's an actual reason for doing one. And there's also just a general lit review. Brittany O'Neill teaches a Literature Review 101 workshop. The link is right here. She's fantastic. She knows what she's talking about. So if you're struggling with just doing a lit review, maybe watch that video, reach out to Brittany. I also have some information about systematized reviews. This is the biggest. Students come in and say, well, it's only me. I'm the only one that's doing this review. Then it's not a systematic review. Systematic review needs a team. It's a systematized review, which basically is you're doing the systematic review process, but there's going to be bias in it because you're the only person that's doing it. So this little chart here breaks down the difference between a systematic review and a traditional lit review. And then I've also provided some examples of all the different types of reviews that I've listed, and that article will also do one as well. And then some more information about meta-analyses, maybe better examples than what my brain works. So the steps in a systematic review. There are 8 solid steps. We're going to kind of go into each one individually, but let's just kind of jump on in. So, and then this is what it makes up a systematic review. This is going to be kind of what your paper will look like, the layout of it. I am a visual person. This is how I learn. So I like to see examples as well. So this is just a little chart for you. But the very first thing you need to do is you need to figure out, are there existing reviews on my topic? Now, that does not mean that you can't do a review, but basically what you want to do is make sure that a systematic review has not been done before, because if there is one already done, there's really no point in doing another one. Now, if you find a systematic review and it's old, or maybe it was poorly done, or maybe you have access to databases they don't have access to. So maybe you're looking in very specific databases and they looked in very specific databases. Maybe your question is you can focus the intervention, or you can change up the population. Maybe you're looking in different contexts. Like maybe y'all are both talking about the same type of, intervention, but maybe one's looking at a school and the other is looking in a hospital setting. So there are so many different review types out there, or so many different types of there are so many systematic reviews out there. There are different places that they're published. So clinical medicine, you'll usually see them in these places: the Cochrane Library, PubMed, Prospero. But there's also public health and sociology. So there's the Community Guide, EPPI Center, and then also some different reviews in other disciplines. You can also, in our discovery system, which is that first search on our homepage, search your topic and then put in systematic reviews. And that's one way you can kind of figure out if there's a systematic review, or it does a big search for you. So figuring out if there is a systematic review already in place is usually your first step. Then once you figure out, okay, there are no systematic reviews on my topic, or maybe there are, but I'm changing this and I want to do it from this angle, we need to start looking at the types of questions. So the basis of a systematic review is a really strong question, and you usually need a framework to help you figure out how you're going to ask your question. There are so many different types of frameworks. People get so caught up in PICO, which is, it stands for patient or population, intervention or exposure, comparisons or control, or outcome and outcome. So if I'm looking at a population, their intervention, I'm comparing them and I want to see what the general outcome is. But you don't have to stick to PICO if you don't want to. There's SPICE, which is setting, perspective, intervention, comparison, evaluation. You can keep it simple. Who, what, how. That's a very easy way to frame your question. Eclipse is really great for health policy management. So expectation, client groups, location, impact, professions, service. You can also, there's this whole chart on formulating non-PICO questions, and then also using the PICO model to design and conduct a systematic search. So figure out how you want your question. Just because this is for health, this is for social science, and this is interdisciplinary doesn't mean you have to stick to these. Like you can, if you're in the health and you want to use a who, what, how, you can. This is the other wonderful thing about systematic reviews, is that you set the rules for this. You set the expectations, so you can formulate your question. I often recommend you formulate it with your team because you want everyone to be on the same page, especially with your definitions, but that's kind of going into the next step. Okay, so inclusion, exclusion criteria. So once you get your question, then you're going to want to start thinking, and this is going to be done before your research question is finalized. Sorry, it's after your research question is finalized, but before the search is run. You need to figure out the limits for your evidence synthesis. So what are you going to include? What are you going to exclude? So I only want articles from the past 10 years. I only want this very specific health intervention. I only want very specific languages from a specific, or not language, a specific geography. Maybe a setting, and then language. So language is hard because if you're only looking at English articles, that's a bias. Research is done all over the world. If I'm looking at rural health interventions in a specific geographic location, and maybe they only speak Spanish, if you're looking for only English speaking articles, you could be missing out on some really good research in other languages because of this. So be careful with the language. And if you do filter, or if you do, narrow by language, you need to provide justification. So just like you only want to include certain articles, you're going to want to justify why you're including these articles, and you're also going to want to justify why you're excluding articles as well. So make sure that you're saying, okay, I'm only searching this date of publication because the last systematic review was from these dates, or maybe I'm searching in this specific journal and this is the date range of that journal, or maybe this intervention or this type of study didn't start until 1980, so I only need 1980 to current. So figure out what you want your inclusion and exclusion criteria to be. And then also, there's this wonderful chart from the University of Melbourne that kind of goes into inclusion exclusion criteria way more in depth. I mean, peer review or not, do you want reported outcomes, settings, study designs, types of publications? Maybe I only want stuff in peer-reviewed articles. That can be a bias, but maybe you don't have the time to dig properly through gray literature. It happens. What happens if no study meets my inclusion or exclusion criteria? Well, that happens. Now, these are called empty reviews. You're more likely to be subject to publication bias, which means you might not get your article published if you do a systematic review and you set up your inclusion exclusion criteria and you run it and you find no articles. However, this is hugely important for identifying gigantic gaps in the literature. So there is this wonderful one that was published, Rapid Prompting Method in Autism Spectrum Disorder, Systematic Review Exposes Lack of Evidence. So if you are trying to figure out what all the evidence says on your topic and you're doing a systematic review and none of them meet your criteria, that's a problem. So this is something to consider. There's some great article, or there's this one at the bottom here, and then there's unanswered questions, implications, and an empty review. I would recommend both of those. But usually if you have pretty standard, okay, I want this intervention, I'm looking for this in this location, and then I want this setting, you're probably going to find what you're looking for. So from there, you will also want to start working on your protocol. Now, your protocol is your roadmap for your systematic review. This is done at the very beginning of the process before you begin your searches, and your protocol can change. It can evolve, but just like you want your roadmap to be basically set in stone before you start on your car trip, you want your roadmap to be basically done. You want your protocol to be done before you run your huge searches. Now, you will do like little basic searches to figure out what's out there on your topic, or to help develop your keywords, or maybe you're trying to figure out what do I want my inclusion exclusion criteria to be? What's even out there? That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, this is basically your introduction, your method section, your basically your discussion, a very brief discussion. So according to Prisma standards, your roadmap, your protocol will have your introduction, and it'll describe your rationale for doing this. So why? What do you hope to get out of doing the systematic review? And then most importantly for me is definitions, because there are so many different ways you can describe something. You want to make sure that everybody on your team and everyone that's reading this review will understand what you mean whenever you say, I'm looking at this. So if I'm trying to define, the DASH diet, I want to make sure that that's set in stone. I'm only looking at this specific diet type, and this is what that diet type is. Your method section. So this is where a librarian can really help you. So what is your inclusion and exclusion criteria? What information sources are you searching? Are you looking at specific databases? What is your search strategy going to be? Are you searching gray literature? How are you doing that? In this instance, Google Scholar is considered gray literature. Just throwing that out there. Also, how are you going to manage all of your data? Where are you keeping all of this stuff? How are you, what is your data collection process? What is your risk of bias? Any data synthesis? So this is basically like the first half of your paper. And so you want to make sure that it is as solid as possible. And then once you have it solid, once you have all of this information included, you will want to make sure you're registering your protocol. Now, there is a template. There's a wonderful, it's from the OSF, and on how to, like, what your evidence synthesis protocol template needs to look like, the things that need to be included. There's also different checklists for, you know, what you need to include. And then also don't forget your Prisma Ps, which are your, you know, protocols reporting. That's what all of this is right here. And then once you get ready to actually submit your protocol, there are different places you can submit to. So if it's a health sciences, Campbell collaboration is usually where you want to do that. So disciplines, business and management, crime and justice, disability, education, was it international development, knowledge transition, implementation, methods, nutrition, and social welfare. Cochrane's healthcare, Campbell collaborations for all of this. Collaboration for environmental evidence are good for environmental issues, but Open Science Framework is multidisciplinary. It's where I've registered my scoping review and a systematic review. It's friendly, it's very solid. I really like the Open Science Framework. Prospero can be great for health and social care, welfare, public health, education, crime, justice, and international development. Now, you need to pay attention to which one you're trying to apply to, because if you are trying to do a educational one and you're trying to stick it in Cochrane, they're not going to accept it. So figure out a different one if that happens. Also, you want to make sure that you're going to include a copy of your search. So you want to make sure that your search at this point is, whenever you're doing your protocol and registering it, that your search is basically solid. Like, give an example of what the search is going to look like. Okay, and then you will have to create a flow diagram. Here's the example of what that flow diagram looks like. This is the 2009 flow diagram, and this is the 2009 checklist. And so this is going to be, you know, how many databases did you start off with? How, you know, you screened, you deduped, you full text accessibility, you got everything. How many do you end up with? So these numbers might be different for they will be different for every single systematic review. You might start off with 2,000, and then by the time you've whittled and narrowed and you know, your inclusion, exclusion, and deduped and everything, you might end up with 100. Or you might only search 100, and then by the time you get through that process, you might only end up with 10. So it really just depends. I get that question all the time. How many articles do I need to include in my review? Well, how in depth is your question? What is your topic? There's so many different, what databases did you look at? There's so much that goes into it, but you basically want to make sure that, you know, you have this, and you will, this will be a flow chart that you fill out, but every systematic review has this. Okay, searching. Now, this is my like bread and butter. This is what I do every single day. So I am not going to give you a very extremely in-depth process for this, because again, it's going to depend on all the different types of, you know, things that going on with your research. But there are this is just a good overview, things to think about. So issues to consider when creating a systematic review search. You want to make sure all your concepts are included in the strategy, that appropriate subject headings are used. You want to make sure that if you might need subject subheadings or floating subheadings, natural language in addition to controlled vocabulary. Certain databases like ERIC, APA Psych Info, Soc Index, any of the medical databases, they all have very specific subject headings and very specific thesauruses or controlled vocabulary. So you can still add in your own words, but you maybe check to see what that controlled vocabulary is, because if you add that to your search, you might get a more successful search. Use of appropriate synonyms and acronyms, truncation and spelling variations is appropriate. If you're searching in, you know, a British-based database, you might maybe include both spellings of like the word color. Appropriate limits such as language, years. I don't usually mess with that stuff too much when I'm doing my search. Like, you know, make sure that usually you're trying to include everything. So we can talk about that. Make sure that if there are any line errors, that when searches are combined using line numbers, make sure the numbers refer to the search as intended. Check indexing of relevant articles, and then make sure your search strategy is adapted as needed for the different databases. So my first mistake when I did my first systematic review, my first scoping reviews, I thought that the search needed to be the exact same in every single database. No, every single database is going to have its own different search, and you have to translate the searches between the databases, which can be scary, but it doesn't have to be. So figuring out what language, okay, this language is appropriate for this database, this language is appropriate for this database, and then, you know, it might look very similar. You might be using a lot of the same keywords, but it also might change depending on your database. Students ask all the time, well, how many databases? And I see a lot of students and they get to be eager beavers and they're like, I'm going to search 7 databases. That might be too much. That's going to get you a lot of results. It might be overwhelming. Do you have the time to search 7 databases properly? You have to translate 7 different searches. The good rule of thumb is first you want to get maybe 5 good seminal papers, figure out where those papers are indexed at. So maybe 1 is in ERIC, or maybe 2 is in ERIC, 1 is in PsycInfo, and then 2 are in Academic Search Complete. So those might be the databases you do your search in. So when selecting databases, maybe use 1 big database that's multidisciplinary, covers lots of fields, and then maybe 2 smaller subject-specific databases. So 3, maybe 4 if you're feeling just like super excited about this search, but really, you know, it just depends on your topic, honestly. So, oh, another thing is if you're working with a team of researchers from other universities, you want to pick databases that all 3 of you have the same access to. So if I am working with someone and they are trying to search Scopus, we don't have Scopus, so it doesn't help me at all. Choosing and searching databases. So this is really where your librarians can help you out. Find your subject specialists. We have subject specialists for every single field that LSU has to offer. I'm the ag person, Marty's art and design, Tom does business humanities, David does coast and environment. So, but all of these librarians are trained in searching. So even if maybe I'm out and you can't make an appointment with me, make an appointment with David or Marcus. They might be able to still help you with, you know, my searches. I often tell students in Ag Extension Education Evaluation to go see Andrea Hebert. She's the education librarian, and she knows so much about this education stuff that I just am still learning or figuring out. And so it might help. Like I can come at it from an ag perspective. She can come at it from an education perspective. Our powers combined create a really great search for you, or help you make sure that you're getting all of your articles that you need. So you can make appointments with every one of these librarians. Also, you can check out their research guides. I'm gonna go back really quickly. Our research guides are all located right here. And so like if you were to look at my entomology guide, for an example, I have different journals, different databases that are subject specific, maybe different government resources, which are great for searching gray literature. So go to these guides. They can help you figure out what databases are the best for your topic. I've also listed some different database links. These are just some ones. I meet with a lot of these students with systematic reviews. So I didn't list every single database guide or every single database that we have. All of our databases, if you go to the library's website, let me scroll over here really quickly, and you can get to every one of these database links by going to all databases and then doing this change subjects right here. And you can get to the databases that way. Boolean operators. So this is that more advanced searching. This is where we start to get into that using the and, or nots. There's a whole tutorial on how to do Boolean searching, how to make sure that you're using it correctly, because you would think that it would be a certain way, but it's not. So check out that tutorial. We also use truncation and wildcard in our search. So truncation is when you use things like this asterisk. So this is going to, if I search and I do teenage with an asterisk, I'm going to find teenager, teenagers, teenaged. but you have to be careful because if you do car, you're going to get car, cardiology, carbohydrate, caramel, carbidid, carsis, and a ton of other words. I tried this trying to be sneaky with policy, and I just did POLIC, I think is what I did, and I was getting like police and all kinds of stuff that I was like, okay, back out, let's try this again. So you can overdo your asterisks. Also, you want to, sometimes I don't trust that the database is working like I need it to, so I might just spell out all the different words. I might say I want teenager and teenagers and teenage, or in this case, teenager or teenagers or teenaged, to get all of them. So it just depends. Sometimes the database works with you, sometimes it doesn't. It's a mystery to everyone. Wildcards, I don't use these as often, but it's things like behavior. So this can get you American spellings or British spellings. So when you have variations in spellings, you might want to use, behavior with the $. Sometimes databases, usually they use the same truncation and wildcard, but not all of them do. And then sometimes the truncation that works in one database doesn't transfer into the other database. You have to figure it out. This is where librarians can help you at. You want to make sure also that you are documenting your search. And there's so many different ways you can do this. And I'm not going to, just for time's sake, go into every single one of these, but database name, the host, your date searched, years covered. I will say that each database has different journals in it, and each journal might have different index runs. So for example, the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition is in the LSU Libraries databases, and it's in the open access journals, it's in Oxford University Press, and they have different date ranges that they're available. So maybe when I'm doing my search, because there's a 1-year delay in the open access journals, maybe I want to run my search through Oxford University Press for this journal. Make sure you're keeping track of your search terms, language restrictions. Did you copy and paste? There is over here on the left-hand side some information about those thesaurus and subject headings. And there's also some more information on how to translate your search strategies, including a search strategy documentation template, a database syntax guide, and then a systematic review search strategy template that can help you translate those searches and keep track of those searches. I'm also going to introduce you to a Excel sheet in a little while that will help you even more. Searching gray literature. So gray literature is defined as literature that's not formally published in sources such as books or journal articles. This can include government reports, conference proceedings, graduate dissertations or theses, unpublished clinical trials, basically anything that's not news reports, anything that's not a peer-reviewed journal article is basically considered gray literature. So your search for your gray literature is not going to be the same as your search in your peer-reviewed. So your peer-reviewed searches are going to be intense, they're going to be big and hefty and like long, or just very intense. Whereas your gray literature search might just be like climate change and the environment, or just something very basic, because a lot of the places you're doing your searching, they're not going to have that advanced search capability. So remember I said Google Scholar? You cannot build an advanced search in Google Scholar. You can't. It's just not possible. We don't know the algorithm. We don't know where they're searching. Predatory journals get looped in there all the time. So basically what you want to do is maybe you search Google Scholar and you do your climate change and environment, but maybe you only grab the first 100 results. You did a sampling. You grabbed the first 100, or maybe the first 300. It just depends. There's all kinds of different places where you can go. There's also this extension add-on from Google Chrome that can train you on the search results of the current website that you're on. So it will record the results and export them into your citation management software, which is nice. But here is all kinds of resources on gray literature searching. So different tools that are available, gray literature databases that you might want to search, theses and dissertations, and some of these are free through the library. Some of them are just online. Clinical trials, public policy. Oh my gosh, there's so many different things you can do for searching public policy. Government documents. make sure you're including your government documents. I also included, Haley Johnson is not a government document. She is the head of government documents here at the library. So if you need help searching government documents and getting into those resources, contact Haley. She is fantastic. And then some other resources, tips on how to Google for your gray literature, things on like how to use .gov or searching, DuckDuckGo in search engine. And then there's also at the very bottom here, there's a gray lit search log that can also help you keep track of your gray literature searching. I included this wonderful tutorial that some of the librarians created on how to set up Google Scholar to search some of the library's databases, if you're interested in that. All right, methodology and documentation. So you're going to have to record, you're going to have to document. You need to figure out what's the appropriate way to do all of this. And there's going to be different ones. So here are some guidelines for health and medicine. There's some guidelines for social sciences, public health interventions, different, guidelines and resources for reviews in other disciplines. And then also everything you need to know about reporting standards for Prisma. There's the PDF checklist, Prisma P. It gets intense over here on this page. We also have some books available through the library on how to do systematic reviews, and then also books on how to do meta-analyses. I'm not as well versed on meta-analyses. That's part of the process I don't usually get to participate in. So if you need some more detailed information over there. Okay, managing the process. So the next question that students ask me all the time is, when do I stop? And you all are researchers. You love research. That's why you're even attending this. So we get really excited and we're like, I just keep finding things. Is there anything else out there? It can be addicting. So you either need to set a date. So after this date, I'm no longer searching. I've been doing this search for 6 months now. Ain't nothing out there that I haven't already seen. Or another good indicator is once you start seeing the same articles over and over, you run your search and you're not getting anything new, it's probably time to stop. So have you considered, questions to consider, have you searched all the appropriate databases? Have you included your non-English literature sources and your gray lit? Have you changed the search strategy to capture the most relevant stuff? How many unique or relevant citations were identified after the last 2 searches? These are really great ways to figure out, okay, how do I stop? After your stop, you will need to then evaluate the results. You want to code the information, explain and discuss the results, and summarize it all in a report. So these are kind of the last steps you'll need to do. Over here, I've just added information about like using information ethically, making sure you don't plagiarize. And here's some resources to help you manage the whole process. So let me get a drink of water. There's Kadima, Colander, Ryan, and RevMan. These are all free. Now, they all basically do the same thing. There are tools to help you document your searches and to keep track. You can upload all of your papers into there. You can help, it helps with figuring out, okay, do we want to include this? Do we not? I personally have heard great things about Kadima. I have not gotten to use it, but I know that I think it's Ryan. One of these can be kind of, I think it's Ryan, can be kind of not that great. Distill SR is not free. It is a fee-based resource, but it is a popular tool. A lot of people use it. If you are on a grant or something and you have money to burn, consider maybe getting a subscription to Distill SR if this is something you're interested in. But they basically all do the same thing. All of these do. Here's a risk of bias tool. So you'll need to make sure that you're figuring out your risk of bias. So Robus is a free tool for you to run and make sure that you're not, you're being as unbiased as possible. There is a wonderful article on how to dedupe of database search results for systematic reviews in EndNote. And then this Excel sheet right here is the pieces workbook, and I'm going to show you it really quickly as soon as it opens. So this Excel, hold on, should have opened it before I did this. So this Excel sheet was created by the systematic review queen, Margaret Foster. And basically it can help you organize all of your searching. So each of these sheets have different, how to frame the question, how to document your criteria, analyzing relevant reviews, teams and meetings, so you can track your team meetings, your library consultations. Then there's also collecting search terms, making sure that you develop your main search. Okay, this is the data I ran, these are the modifications to it, that didn't work. Or maybe I did this, I changed this search up and all of a sudden everything was wonderful. This is a place for you to save and document all of your searches. You can do that in here. You can expand, like ways to expand your search, different bibliographic databases, gray literature, non-database approaches. You can really utilize this Excel sheet as much as you want, as often. It helps to evaluate. I have students that use parts of it. I have students that have done, like, you filled out this whole entire thing. It really just depends on your own personal needs and how big of a organization nerd you might be. So how to code it. There's stuff on discussion and conclusion. Here's those things that can help you with your flow chart. How to write it, so making sure you're including the different parts to it. You really can go pretty in depth with this Excel sheet. But I do recommend it. Like I said, it's been developed by someone who is the best at systematic reviews and can help, make your life easier. And then also citation management. So we do have citation management software. There's EndNote, Mendeley, and Zotero. So here's a whole guide on citation management. Mendeley is not good for systematic reviews. I'll say that again. Mendeley is not good for systematic reviews. I have not had this experience, but some of the other librarians at that workshop I attended were like very against Mendeley. So stick with EndNote or Zotero for your systematic reviews. EndNote is free through the LSU Tigerware. They have a really robust help online if you have questions, and I would often send students to the help online because your EndNote is going to be very different depending on which version you have, and if you have a Mac versus a Dell or whatever, a desktop. But it is free through LSU Tigerware. And a lot of our citation stuff can go, it works well with EndNote. There's also different citation management tips, how to export citations from PubMed to EndNote, and then also information on how to dedupe. So how to deduplication. You only want one article. You don't want to count your articles 15 times. So. And then lastly, there's this whole wonderful help. So more information, there's a whole webinar by Margaret Foster. If for some reason it just didn't click with me today, hey, you're not hurting my feelings if you have to go watch it. But just different, resources for you. That Pieces of Systematic Review guide is right here. Literature planning forms, search strategies. I also did this, a different type of, I'm more educated now back than 2018, but there's a PowerPoint on it. And then here's some information about how you define the role of authors and contributors. So if your professor isn't contributing anything to your paper, hasn't done anything for your systematic review, I don't know if you want to list them as an author. However, if they are actually, contributing, they're going through and deduping stuff, then yeah, they definitely need to be considered an author. If I sat down with you and I developed your entire search strategy and then also helped you write your protocol, I should be included as a co-author. But if I only, sat down with you and we made no agreement, you don't have to include me. You're not hurting my feelings. Also, we want to, here's some stuff about when you do your search, you want to make sure that there's a difference between curly quotation marks and straight quotation marks. Someone did a whole study on it and how you could end up messing up some stuff if you were using curly quotation marks versus straight quotation marks. So something very small that I didn't even think about that actually does matter for your search. Just So some additional information. And then finally, we have our Ask Us. So this is here, you can make an appointment with a subject specialist right here. This is kind of the biggest part. And then there's whole evidence synthesis. As of right now, I'm the only one that feels comfortable meeting with students about systematic reviews, but we do have other librarians who can help you. And then I do ask you to fill out this sheet before you come. So it's all about what your topic is. It's just making sure that you have some work, that you've started doing some of this work before we meet. So your proposed topic, are you expecting to publish your evidence synthesis somewhere? What's your target date of completion? What's the aim of this? And then some, give me 2 examples of your, what are some good papers that you like, that you want to include, so I can start thinking about your search. I also tell students, anytime you make an appointment with me, my calendar, if there's a free time, it is yours. You can make an appointment with me. Just make sure you give me as much information as possible. Don't just say, oh, systematic review, not helpful. What are we looking at? Well, do you need help with your systematic review? What's your topic on? What have you done already? What have you not done? So that our meetings can be as, make sure that we get as much out of them as we possibly can, because you guys are doing research in areas I have no idea about. You're so much smarter than I am, so I want to make sure that we're on kind of the same level whenever we sit down and have our appointments. But you might feel after this webinar that you are just ready to go. You can do anything. Oh yeah, Marcus also has experience doing systematic reviews, so he is also available. And here he's the engineering and computer sciences librarian. So if you have questions, you can also talk to Marcus about systematic reviews as well. But at this point, I'm going to stop sharing. And I want to know if you guys have any questions. I'm also going to stop recording. So let me just stop.